to order and look at the minutes of July 1st, 2021 meeting.
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. For unfinished business, we have a review of Board of Appeals bylaws, definition of quorum, and signing bylaws. And I think everybody looked at that on the last meeting, and I wasn't here, so I'm a little bit out of.
That's correct, Chairman. Thank you. We did discuss that last time, the difference between the definition we had for a quorum and what the state had, and talk about that. The state, our city attorney suggested we go with the state so we don't have a confusion with other boards and things too. So we revised that. You'll see it on the second page of your packet under meetings quorum. The quorum shall consist of 1/2 or more of the members of the governing body or a smaller number, if sufficient for the governing body to transact business on behalf of the public entity. And that's a good definition. It gives us lots of flexibility for the meeting. So all we have to do today is sign and we didn't change the compensation and anything. Maybe someday. When I'm gone.
Yeah.
And then we have the updated hearing schedule. The August meeting is canceled. I believe that was August 12th for that. And then moving on to new business.
Just one quick question on the meeting schedule. Is there still a meeting on August 5th? Annual meeting? Doesn't look like it. Okay.
That was removed right off the schedule. I don't know if the last one had 2 in August.
Looks like all of August meetings were canceled. Right?
Correct. None in August, correct.
I had it noted as an annual meeting, which is under this section of meetings. The first Thursday of August each year is the annual meeting. I don't necessarily promote another meeting, but I just want to be certain whether.
No, we do have to do the annual meeting, so
I think the annual meeting is for the purpose of electing officials. And if you want to postpone that to the next meeting, we can. I don't know if we need to vote on that.
why don't we just have the chairman reflect that? That'll be delayed to the September 9th meeting?
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Go ahead and just move that to the
Okay.
September 9th and add it to that. So,
Okay, will do. Thank you.
you bet. All right.
Thanks for your flexibility.
With that, we can start the review of the International Residential Code.
Good morning. I will be presenting chapter 1 through 4 of the changes and amendments to the 2021 IRC. The first thing to note is ICC changed the numbering system between the 2018 and the 21 code. The 18 went continuous numbering through. The 21 now has the page, but it has the chapter in front of it. So you'll see on there, it's all marked like 1-1 is chapter 1, page 1. Just to make it so it's easier to follow what this is doing. So to begin with chapter 1, the very first paragraph we need to amend to read as follows. These provisions shall be known as the residential code for 1 and 2 family dwellings of, and we're striking name of jurisdiction and inserting the city of Fargo, and shall be cited as such and will be referred to herein as this code. The next one is the purpose section. They added a few more words to it. So it now reads, the purpose of this code is to establish minimal requirements to provide a reasonable level of safety, health, and general welfare through affordable structural strength, means of egress, stability, sanitation, light and ventilation, energy conservation, and safety to life and property from fire and other hazards, and to provide a reasonable level of safety to firefighters and emergency responders during emergency operations. The next section is 102.7.1, addition, alterations, and repairs. Again, some more wording was added to this. Additions, alterations, repairs, and relocation shall not cause an existing structure to become less compliant with the provisions of this code than the existing building or structure was prior to the addition, alteration, or repair. An existing building together with its addition shall comply with the height limits of this code. Where the alteration causes the use or occupancy to be changed to one not within the scope of this code, the provisions of the international existing building code shall apply. The next section is 104.8, and this is an amendment again that's been inserted, and it reads, liability, the building officials, members of the Board of Appeals, or employees charged with the enforcement of this code while acting for the jurisdiction in good faith without malice in the discharge of the duties required by this code and other pertinent laws or ordinances shall not there be rendered civilly or criminally liable personally, and is hereby relieved from personal liability from any damage occurred to a person or property as a result of any act or by reason of any act or omission in the discharge of the official duties. This code shall not construe to relieve from or lessen the responsibility of any person owning, operating, or controlling any building or structure for any damages to persons or property caused by defects, nor shall the code enforcement agency or the city be held as assuming any such liability by reason of the inspection authorized by this code or any permits or certifications issued under this code. The next section in 1 is 104.81, and it's legal defense. Any suit or criminal complaint instituted against any officer or employee because of an act or omission performed by that officer or employee in the lawful discharge of duties and under the provisions of this code shall be afforded all the immunities and defenses provided by other applicable local, state, or federal law, and shall be defended by legal representation of the jurisdiction until the final termination of the proceedings. The building official or any of subordinate shall not be liable for any cost in any action, suit, or proceeding that is instituted. The next section is 104.10.1, and it's deleted in its entirety. The next section is 105.2. Excuse me, work exempt from permit. Permits shall not be required for the following, and that's been was striked. And exempt from permit requirement of this code shall not be deemed to grant authorization for any work to be done in any manner in violation of the provisions of this code or any other law or ordinance of the jurisdiction. Permits shall not be required for the following. Under building, 1-story detached accessory structures, and we're striking out used as tool and storage shed, playhouse, and similar use, provided the floor area does not exceed, and it was in the code 200, we're changing it to 120 square feet. Excuse me. Fences, and we're not over, and we're striking 7 foot and changing it to 8.5 feet high. Line 7, we're striking out prefabricated out, and we're putting in swimming pools that are less than 24 inches in depth. Number 9, window awning supported by an exterior wall that, which is the word struck out, do not project more than 54 inches from the exterior wall and do not require additional support. Thank you, Chris. Decks not exceeding, we're striking 200 and changing it to 120 square feet in area that are not more than, striking out 30 and changing it to 7 inches above grade at any point, are not attached to a dwelling and do not serve the exit door required by section 311.4. On to section 105.3.1.1, and it is deleted in its entirety. Section 106.1.4 is deleted in its entirety. Section 106.4 is deleted in its entirety. Section 108.3 is a minute to read. Building permit valuations. Building permit valuations shall include the total value of the work for which the permit is being issued, such as electric, gas, mechanical, plumbing, equipment, and other permanent systems, including materials and labor. If in the opinion of the building official, the valuation is underestimated on the application, the permit shall be denied unless the applicant showed detailed estimates to meet the approval of the building official. Final building permit valuations shall be set by the building official. Section 110.1, use and change of occupancy. A building or structure shall not be used or occupied in whole or in part, and a change of occupancy of a building or structure or portion thereof shall not be made until the building official has issued a certificate of occupancy thereforth as provided herein. Section 110.3, certificate issued. After the building official inspects the building or structure and does not find any violations of the provisions of this code or other laws that are enforced by the department, the building official shall issue a certificate of occupancy containing the following. And you'll notice that I have number 1, this is an addition. It was never required before, but now the permit number is. And then number 8 is where an automatic sprinkler system is provided and whether the sprinkler system is required. Section 110.5, revocation. The building official is authorized to suspend or revoke a certificate of occupancy issued under the provisions of this code in writing whenever the certificate is issued in error or on the basis of incorrect information supplied or where it is determined that the building or structure or portions thereof is in violation of the provisions of this code or other ordinances of the jurisdiction. Authority, where the building official finds any work regulated by this code to be performed in a manner contrary to the provisions of this code or in a dangerous or unsafe manner, the building official is authorized to issue a stop work order. Issuance, section 114.2. The stop work order shall be in writing and shall be given to the owner of the property, the owner's authorized agent, or person performing the work. Upon issuance of a stop work order, the site of work shall immediately cease. The stop work order shall state the reason for the order and the conditions under which the cited work is authorized to resume. 114.3, emergencies. Where there is an emergency exists, the building official shall not be required to give written notice prior to stopping the work. 114.4, failure to comply. Any person who shall continue any work after having been served with a stop work order, except such work as the person is directed to perform to remove a violation or unsafe condition, shall be subject to fines established by the authority having jurisdiction. That is all the amendments and word changing to chapter 1. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is definitions. So I'm going to go kind of quick because it's not real estate. So the first thing we have is 201.3, and it's an amendment, and it states terms defined in other codes. Where terms are not defined in this code, such terms shall have the meanings ascribed to them as in other code publications of the International Code Council. Wherever the term International Plumbing Code and/or International Private Sewage Disposal Code is used in an international residential code, it shall mean the North Dakota State Plumbing Code. Wherever the term ICC Electrical Code is used in the International Residential Code, it shall mean the National Electrical Code together with the North Dakota State Wiring Standards. Wherever reference is made to floodplain requirements, it shall mean the Fargo Floodplain Management Ordinance together with the Fargo Floodproof Code, Fargo Municipal Code, Article 21-06. Into the definitions. Some of them we can go through. Battery system stationary storage is deleted. There is a whole entire new section in the code book just for that. Building had a minor word change, and some of them are just, they're adding a few words for clarity. So where you see added, wording added, it's basically they're clarifying from the 18 to the 21 what they meant. So let's see. So the one that's new, or one of them, is intermodal shipping container is now defined in the IRC. And otherwise, we have a new definition now. What we all know as a bedroom is now a sleeping unit. That would be probably the highlight of, oh, and then townhouses. The term townhouse now means the entire structure, and each individual townhouse within that structure is a townhouse unit. And that was about the highlight of the definitions. Chapter 3, Section 301.1.4, intermodal shipping containers. It basically has the new requirement. It says that intermodal shipping containers that are repurposed for the use as buildings or structures shall be designed in accordance with the structural provisions in Section 3115 of the International Building Code. So instead of spelling out everything about what's going to be required for these to be used, they're referring it to the IBC, which has it all in there. 301.2.1 wind design criteria, they added some wording. Basically, before there wasn't anything mentioning metal roof shingles, and then the lowest wind speed was clarified what that means. Wind limitations and wind design required, there's wording added. It sets 140 miles per hour as a special wind region, which we don't deal with, but Table 301.2 is in the code book, of course, blank because it's a generic table, and we fill in all of the required numbers that go with that. From code cycle 2018 to 21, there was no changes. 301.2.1, the tables are renamed to better describe roof type. So it just adds the words gable, hip, and like that in it. Height and exposure adjustment coefficients, it adjusts, adjustment for exposure be lowered. We don't really have to be concerned with that. And then there's two of them that are seismic there. We're category A. Most of it had to do category D, which is the earthquake zones. Um, 301.2.2.6 has to do with hillside light frame construction. What they did is, without reading all of it, what they did is they changed the vertical units to horizontal, and the tallest clearance is now 7 feet. So a lot of it, again, we don't have a lot of hillside in Fargo. So, and then there's an exception, which is the only thing that was really the most important part of it, that light frame construction in which the lowest frame floor is supported directly on concrete or masonry wall over the full length of all sides except the downhill side of the dwelling need not be considered an irregular dwelling under item 8. 301.2.27 is height limitations. They changed some wording again. It's for the seismic zone. 301.2.210 is anchorage of water heaters again. It's got to do with seismic zone D, which we're not in. 301.2.4 is deleted in its entirety. 301.3 story height. There's an exception. A story height not exceeding 13 feet 7 inches is permitted provided the maximum wall stud clear height does not exceed 12 feet. The wall studs are in accordance with exceptions 2 to 3 of section 602.3.1, or an engineer design is provided for the wall frame members, and wall bracing for the building is in accordance with section 302.10. Studs shall be laterally supported at the top and the bottom plate in accordance with section 602.3. So the exception pretty much is spelling out the other sections of the code that you have to comply with, is what that did. Table 301.5, it used to be that there was just one column, and what they did is they took what was the concentrated load column and they moved it over on its own, but none of the requirements changed. They just did it, I think, more for clarification which was which. Townhouses wording change, again, like the definition, a townhouse now is the whole structure, and each individual one is now considered in the wording townhouse unit. Common walls, a wording change. They put it, again, it's an exception. Common walls are permitted to extend to and be tight against the inside of an exterior wall if the cavity between the end of the common wall and the exterior sheathing is filled with a minimal of 2-inch nominal thickness wood studs. So it's just another option for a separation between two units. Table 302.11, exterior walls. The fourth column is amended. The amendment is the same as it's been in the past codes. There is no change to that. That's the distance to between structures. Section 302.2.6, structural independency, a word change again. They changed it from townhouse to townhouse unit. Same with 302.3. Again, the word townhouse is now townhouse unit. 302.4.1, through penetrations, there's a new exception. The angular space created by the penetration of a water-filled fire sprinkler pipe, providing that the angular space is filled with a material complying with item 1.2 of the exceptions. Basically, they're saying now you put the angular space around the sprinkler pipe, you fill it with an infrared caulking, and it's now accepted as an alternate method. Membrane penetrations, the angular space created by the penetration of a fire sprinkler or water-filled fire sprinkler piping, provided that the angular space is covered with a metal plate. So it's more they were clarifying what the sprinkler companies have to do where they penetrate through walls. Section 302.5.1 is amended as follows. Opening protection. Openings from a private garage directly into a room used for sleeping purposes shall not be permitted. Other openings between the garage and the residence shall be equipped with a solid wood door not less than 1 inch and 3/8 in thickness, solid or honeycomb core steel door not less than 1 inch and 3/8 thick, or a 20-minute fire-rated door equipped with a self-closing or automatic closing device. And what is struck in this is the automatic closing device part. Interior finish, 302.8.1. Before there wasn't a whole lot of clarification with foam plastic. That section says that foam plastics used in interior finish shall comply with section 316.5.10. 302.95 again is dealing with plastics that are used as interior finish, and it's setting now what it had to been tested to, and they have to be tested in accordance with NFPA 286 and should comply with the criteria in section 302.94. 303.1, habitable rooms. We added some words. There's exceptions now for ventilation. So one of them is a whole house mechanical ventilation system or a mechanical ventilation system capable of producing 0.35 air changes per hour in the habitable rooms is installed in accordance with section M1505. For kitchens, the glazing area need not be operable where the opening is not required by R310 and a local exhaust system is installed in accordance with section M11505. Section 303.4, mechanical ventilation. That we're asking to have tabled for now. It would need to be discussed with the energy code requirements. It had been deleted in the 2018 code. Uh, 305, ceiling height. Minimal height, there's a new exception. Beams and girders spaced apart not less than 36 inches in clear finish width shall project not more than 78 inches from the finished floor. 308, 6.3 screens, general, words added. Now it's required to have a broken glass retention screen. And the same with 6.4, where there's multiple glazings, it has to have a glass retention screen. So what they're adding is if the glass breaks, something stops it from flying around. 308.6.5, screens not required, words added, screens shall not be required where laminated glass complying with item 1 of section 308.6.2 is used as a single glazing or inboard plane in a multiple glazing. 308.6.7, screen characteristics. Words are added, shall be within 4 inches of the glass and not have a mesh opening of greater than 1 inch by 1 inch. Section 303.4 is deleted in its entirety. 310.1, emergency escape and rescue opening required, words added. Emergency escape and rescue opening shall open directly into a public way or to a yard or court having a minimal width of 36 inches that opens to the public way. What is added there is the 36 inches. And then there's exceptions. Yeah. Where the dwelling unit or the townhouse unit, a yard shall not be required to open directly into a public way where the yard opens into an unobstructed path from the yard to the public way. Such paths shall have a width of not less than 36 inches. 310.1.1 Operational constraints and opening control devices. There's words added again to this. Window opening control devices complying with ASTM F2090 shall be permitted to be used on windows serving as a required emergency escape rescue opening and shall not be more than 70 inches above the finished floor. What was added there is the standard. Emergency escape and rescue openings, they changed the words. Emergency escape and rescue openings shall have a minimal dimension in accordance with 310.2.1 through 310.24. 310.2.1 says emergency escape and rescue openings shall have a net clear opening of less than 5.7 square feet. The exception is a minimal net opening for grade floor emergency escape and rescue openings shall be 5 feet. Section 310.2.2 is a number change. There is more than one of them between 18 and 21. Section 310.2.3 is amended to read window sill height. Where a window is provided as the emergency escape and rescue opening, it shall have a sill height of not more than 44 inches above the floor. Where the sill height is below grade, it shall be provided with a window well in accordance with section 310.2.3. Sill height shall be measured from the finished floor to the bottom of the clear opening. 310.3.1 is deleted. 310.4 area wells. Again, there's a number change from the 18 to the 21 as far as the number 4 area wells. An emergency and escape opening where the bottom of the clear opening is below the adjacent grade shall be provided with a area well in accordance with section 310.4.1 through 310.44. Section 310.4.2 is amended to read as follows. Ladders and steps. Window wells with a vertical depth greater than 44 inches shall be equipped with a permanently affixed ladder or steps usable with the window in the fully open position or equipped with a permanently attached platform at least 30 by 16 inches. The distance between the top of the window well and the platform shall be 42 inches and shall not impede the operation of the window. Ladders or steps required by this section shall not be required to comply with sections 311.7 and we're scratching from the code section 311.8. Ladders or rungs shall have an inside width of not less than, and we're changing that from at least, of 12 inches and shall project not less than, and again, it's at least we're striking and changing it to not less than, 3 inches from the wall and shall be spaced not more than 18 inches on center vertically for the full height of the window well. Exception, terraced window wells with a maximum of 24 inches per vertical rise and a minimum of 12 inches per horizontal projection on each level shall also be allowed. Section 310.4.2.1 and 310.4.2.2 are amended to read as follows. Ladders and steps. Windows wells equipped with vertical depth greater than 44 shall be equipped with permanently affixed ladders usable with the window in fully open position and shall be permanently attached platform at least 30 inches by 16 inches. The maximum distance from the top of the window well and the platform shall be 42 and shall not impede the operation of windows. Ladders or steps required by this section shall not be required to comply with 311.7. Ladders or rungs shall have an inside width of not less than 12 inches, shall not project less than 3 inches from the wall, and shall be spaced not more than 18 inches on center vertically for the full height of the window well. And again, there's the exception for the terrace window wells with a maximum of 24 inches per vertical rise and a minimum of 12 inches per horizontal projection in each level. 310.4.4 bars, grills, covers, and screens. They added words, mostly the or similar device is what was added. Replacement windows for emergency escape and opening, there's a number change. It's now 310.5. 310.6 dwelling additions is new exception. There's an exception in that an operable window complying with section 310.7.1 shall be acceptable as an emergency escape and rescue opening. 310.7 alterations or repairs of existing basements. This is a new number section. And the content. Sleeping rooms created in an existing basement shall be provided with an emergency escape and rescue opening in accordance with section 310.1. Other than sleeping rooms, where basements undergo alterations or repairs, an emergency escape and rescue opening is not required. Exception. An operable window complying with section 310.7.1 shall be acceptable as an emergency escape and rescue opening. 310.7.1 existing emergency escape and rescue opening, where a change of occupancy would require an emergency escape and rescue opening in accordance with section 310.1, operable windows serving as the emergency escape and rescue opening shall comply with the following. An existing operable window shall provide a minimal net clear opening of 4 square feet with a minimal net clear opening height of 22 inches and a minimal clear net opening width of 20 inches. A replacement window where such window complies with both of the following. The replacement window meets the size requirements of item 1. The replacement window is the manufacturer's largest standard size window that fit within the existing rough opening. The replacement window shall be permitted to be of the same operating style as the existing window or a style that provides an equal or greater window opening area than the existing window. That whole section is new. The wording with the largest standard window is the main thing that changed there. 311.3, the exceptions are amended as follows. Floors and landings at exterior doors. Exceptions. Exterior balconies less than 60 square feet and only accessible from a door are permitted to have a landing less than 36 inches measured in the direction of travel. A landing is not required on the outside of an exterior door other than the required egress door, where a stairway with a total rise of less than 30 inches is located on the exterior side of the door, provided the door does not swing over the stairway. Section 311.31 is amended to read as follows. Floor elevations that require egress doors, landings, or finished floors that require egress doors shall not be more than 1.5 inches lower than the top of the threshold. Exception: the landing or floor on the exterior side shall not be more than 7 3/4 / 8 below the top of the threshold, provided the door does not swing over the landing or the floor. Where exterior landings or floors serve as a required egress are not at grade, they shall be provided with access to grade by means of a ramp in accordance with 311.8 or a stairway in accordance with 311.7. Section 311.32 is amended as follows. Floor elevations for other exterior doors other than the required egress door, shall be provided with landings or floors not more changed to 8 inches below the top of the threshold. Exception: a top landing is not required where a stairway of not more than 2 rises with a total rise of 30 inches is located on the exterior side of the door, provided that the door does not swing over the stairway. 311.7.5.1 is amended to read as follows. Riser height. The riser height shall not be more than 8 inches. We're changing from 7 to 3/4. Section 311.7.52 is amended to read as follows. Treads. The tread depth shall not be less than 10 inches, scratching 9. The tread depth shall be measured horizontally between the vertical planes of the foremost projection of the adjacent tread and at a right angle to the tread's leading edge. The greatest tread depth within any flight of stairs shall not exceed the smallest by more than 3/8 of an inch. Exception: where a landing is not provided or required by Section 311.3, 311.3.2, or 311.7.6, the top tread of a stair serving an exterior door other than the required exit door, an in-swing door opening into an attached garage shall be permitted to exceed the smallest tread by more than 3/8. Such a tread shall be at least 18 inches measured in the direction of travel. Section 311.7.5.2.1 is amended to read as follows. Winder treads. Winder treads shall have a minimal tread depth of not less than 9 inches of scratch, measured between the vertical planes of the foremost projection of the adjacent tread at the intersection within the walk line. Section 311.7.6 is hereby amended to read as follows. Landings for stairways. There shall be a floor or landing at the top and bottom of each stairway. Exception: a floor or landing is not required at the top of an interior flight of stairs, including stairs in an enclosed garage, provided the door does not swing over the stairs. A landing is not required at the top of the exterior flight of a stairs with a total rise of less than 30 inches, provided the door does not swing over the stairway. Section 311.7.7 stairway walking surface, there's a new exception, which I thought was important, where the surface of a landing is required elsewhere in the code to drain surface water, the walking surface of the landing shall be sloped not steeper than 1 unit vertically and 20 units horizontally, 5% slope in the direction of travel. That makes it so that we don't have the issue with stoops, we'll call them, not having any drainage. Because then now it doesn't have to be flat. 311.7.8.4 continuity, they just added some words for clarity of that. 311.8 ramps, they added words were required by this code or provided ramps shall comply with this section. Exception, ramps not within or serving a building, porch, or deck. And the big thing there was the words added is the exception. I promise you all, 3 is the longest one. Section 312.1.1 is hereby amended to read as follows. Where required, guards shall be provided for those portions of, and then of course we took out a located along, open-sided walking surfaces including stairs, ramps, and landings that are located more than 30 inches measured vertically to the floor or grade below at any point within 36 inches horizontally to the edge of the open side or the bottom of a window well within 36 inches horizontally. And then includes insect screening shall not be considered a guard. Section 312.2.2, emergency escape and rescue opening. Where an operable window serves as an emergency escape and rescue opening, a window opening control device or a fall prevention device after operation to release the control device or fall prevention device allows the window to open fully. Shall not reduce the net clear opening area of the window unit to less than the area required by 310.2 and 310.22. Section 313.1 is amended to read as follows. Townhouse automatic fire sprinkler systems. An automatic residential sprinkler system shall be installed in townhouses where the townhouses are located on a private street or a private fire department access road that is required to be greater than 150 feet in length as required by section 3 or 503 of the International Fire Code. 313.1.1 is amended to read design and installation. Excuse me. Automatic residential fire sprinkler systems for townhomes shall be designed and installed in accordance with section P 2904 or NFPA 13D, FPA 13R, or NFPA 13. Section 313.2 is then deleted in its entirety. Section 314.3, they added words for smoke detectors in hallways and in room opening into the hallway in a dwelling unit where the ceiling height of a room opening to a hallway serving bedrooms exceeds that of the hallway by 24 inches or more. It was more of a clarification of that distance when it's now required another smoke detector and an elevation change in the building. 314.3.1, installation near cooking appliances, some more new words. Smoke alarms listed and marked helps reduce cooking nuisance alarms shall not be installed less than 6 feet horizontally from a permanently installed cooking appliance. Carbon monoxide alarms. There's a new exception. Number 3, installation, alteration, or repair of a mechanical system that are not fuel fired. Section 316 is foam plastics. There's some new wording in there. Mostly they're giving the NFPA standard that must be met and the tests that were done. So I won't read all that because it's mostly the standard numbers that were added. 317.1, location required. This has to do with wood that's decay resistant. So they added for in the crawl space or unexcavated areas. And then there's also, before it didn't have anything about if you have a wood column that comes in contact with a basement floor, that also now has to be decay resistant or treated or separated from the concrete. Section 320, accessibility. There's a new section called live work units, but it immediately sends you to the IBC for information. Section 322, flood resistant construction, is deleted in its entirety. Section 323, storm shelters. They added some wording, and basically what it says now is there has to be a sealed document kept with the system that describes that it meets the criteria. And then there's the exception to it is storm shelters, structural components, and impact protective systems that are listed and labeled to indicate the compliance. So basically what it says is if you buy a system that's already been tested and labeled, it's good. Section 324.3, photovoltaic systems was added. They added the listing numbers from UL and NFPA for those systems. The 324.5 building integrated systems, they add the reference to section 905. 324.6.3 emergency escape and rescue opening exception is added. So where a system is of like this is installed in accordance with section 690.12 of the NFPA 70, where the removal or cutting away of portions of the system during firefighting operations has been determined not to expose a firefighter to electrical shock. So it's basically that, being that these are voltage systems that that if there's a rescue opening area, it has to be that the firefighters know that there is something there that could be hazardous. Section 326, habitable attics, is a whole new section. I'm not going to read through the whole thing because it's kind of long, but it basically is the same thing that always was for attic areas, habitable attic areas in homes. 327 is deleted in its entirety. 328 is a whole new section, it's energy storage systems. 329 is a whole new stationary engine generators. And also 330 is stationary fuel cell power systems. And basically it lays out what is required from the IBC. That ends chapter 3. Chapter 4, 401.1 is amended and reads as follows. Application. The provisions of this code shall control the design and construction of the foundation spaces for, and we scratched the word all, it says for buildings. In addition to the provisions of this chapter, the design and construction of the foundations at flood hazard areas as established by 301.2.1 shall meet the provisions of section 322, the Fargo Flood Proofing Code, Article 21-06, and any other applicable requirements of the city of Fargo. Wood foundations shall be designed and installed in accordance with, and then it's the American Wood Treated Lumber Council. Section 401.3 is amended to read as follows. Drainage. Surface drainage shall be diverted to a storm, sewer, conveyance, or other approved point of collection that does not create a hazard. Lots shall be graded to drain away from the foundation walls. The grade shall fall not fewer than, and then we scratch a minimal of 6 inches within the first 10 feet. There was an exception, and that's been completely scratched. 403.1, subsection 1, 2, and 3. Minimal width and thickness for concrete footings. Sizing of the footings required are increasing for most story and types of structures with light framing. It's pretty nominal. Nothing in the field's really going to change from what we're doing now. 403.1.1, they changed the minimal size of a footing. It is now 12 inches in width and 6 inches in depth. It used to be 12 inches and 4 inches. So they made it a little thicker. 403.1.4 minimal depth. They added the words, where applicable, the depth of the footing shall conform to section 403.1.4.1 and then deck footings in accordance with 507.3. And then section 403.1.4.1, exceptions 1, 2, and 3 are amended to read as following. Frost protection. Under the exceptions, protection of freestanding accessory buildings, and then we scratched with the area of 600 square feet or less of light frame construction, and then we scratched the height of the eave shall not be required. Protection of freestanding accessory structures with the area of 400 square feet or less, or other than light frame construction, again we scratched the eave height, shall not be required. Decks, and we scratched not supported by dwelling, need not be provided with footings that extend below the frost line. Foundation anchorage.
I got a question on that last one.
Yes.
So is that number 3 exception for decks?
Yep.
So are you saying that any decks that are added to a house, for example, that are supported partially by a house, they don't need to have a frost protected foundation?
Correct.
So they don't need drilled piers, they don't need anything, you can put the posts on a block, anything you want out there?
Correct.
Has that always been the city of Fargo, how you guys have done it?
Yes.
It has been that way since we've all been here.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty in changing. It's the same in West Fargo. It's the same in Horace. I believe it's a little different in Moorhead where they've done some preliminary prescriptive design for decks, but it's always been that way here in Fargo.
Okay, so is it just when you actually enclose the deck and make it more of a sunroom, then you actually need to have a drilled pier or some type of?
Correct. There's requirements that that deck is only attached at one point, so there's only one hinge point, and it cannot have anything above it, even a pergola or anything above the structure. It would, if they did that, it'd have to be independent or some other way to do it. So it's hard to make that change that it's been working for so long, and it can surely be discussed.
No, I'm fine with it. We get a lot of these questions sometimes, usually on the sunrooms or pergolas. So I was curious what the difference was there, but that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, Chris did discuss it with West Fargo, and he said he'd like to look at it next code cycle again. It is discussed every time,
Okay.
every code change.
403.1.6 foundation anchorage. There's words added. Anchor bolts shall be permitted to be located while the concrete is still plastic and before it has set. Where anchor bolts resist placement or consolidation of the concrete around anchor bolts is impeded, the concrete shall be vibrated to ensure full contact between anchor bolts and concrete. They never had anything before. It was just a given that you could insert anchor bolts in non-hardened concrete, I'll call it. But they clarified that now there's actually wording about that in the code. 404.1.3.2 is amended as follows. Reinforcement for foundation walls. Concrete foundation walls shall be laterally supported at the top and bottom. Horizontally reinforcement shall be provided in accordance with table 404.1.2, parentheses 1. Vertical reinforcement shall be provided in accordance with table 404.1.2, parentheses 2, 404.1.2, parentheses 3, 404.1.2, parentheses 4, 404.1.2, parentheses 5, 404.1.2, parentheses 6, 404.1.2, parentheses 7, or 404.1.2, parentheses 8, or table 404.1.2, parentheses 10, and figure 404.1.2, parentheses 1, or table 404.1.2, parentheses 11, and 404.1.2, parentheses 2. Vertical reinforcement for flat basement walls retaining 4 feet or more of unbalanced backfill is permitted to be determined in accordance with table 404.1.2, parentheses 9. For basement walls supporting above grade concrete walls, vertical reinforcement shall be the greater of the required by table 404.1.2, parentheses 2 through 404.1.2, parentheses 8, or by section R608 for the above grade wall. In buildings assigned to seismic category D, concrete foundation wall shall comply with 404.1.4.2. You will see that I referenced a table that is not in the code book, which is now the next amendment. Table 404.1.2 parentheses 10 is adopted as follows, and that is our floodproofing requirement for the reinforcement. And then there's notes. Chart is based on the active soil pressure of 45 pounds per cubic foot. Reinforcing seal shall be ASTM A615 FY, 60 K pounds per square inch tensile. Vertical reinforcement bars are to be located on the inside face. Minimal concrete strength is 3,000 pounds per square inch. Backfill shall be not placed until first floor framing and sheathing is installed and fastened, or adequate bracing. The concrete floor slab is in place or the wall is adequately braced. The second table that I referenced in there that you won't see in the code book is table 404.1.211. And this is again another flood. What you're looking at is the PCF on it. The first one is 45, this is now 65. Now this chart is based on a soil pressure of 65 pounds per cubic foot. And the rest of the requirements are basically the same. The next page is the figures that I referenced that are not in the code book also, which is figure 404.1.2 parentheses 1 and 404.1.2 parentheses 2. And those two diagrams are there.
I got a question on that diagram.
Sure.
So you call out the minimum 1.5 clear distance to put the rebar in the inside face. What's the maximum distance that bar can be? Is there?
So somewhere in the wall where it has to be? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, in these diagrams, you show 1.5 clear from the inside face.
Right.
Minimum.
Minimal, I mean, normally when we inspect, we're looking for it that it's, again, not within that 1.5 of the outside of the wall either.
Sure, but shouldn't that actually just say 1.5 clear? Because isn't that critical that bar is right there? That bar can't slide over to the center because it defeats the purpose of the strength of the wall of having the rebar in the inside face, right?
Right.
Is that something that should get changed?
If you have any suggestions for revisions to this, and we welcome that. This was an engineer design. It was done how long ago, you think, Chris? Long time ago, 9-10 years, and it's one we've been using ever since then. So it is a sign and stamp document that's provided with our floodproofing requirements, so we follow it.
I've ran into cases where, maybe someone didn't get an inspection done on the basement wall, and then we do some GPR scanning and find out the rebar's centered in the wall, or maybe even closer to the outside face. That's a huge difference in a basement wall where that rebar is located. I agree on the 1.5 because that's what you need for minimum clear, but you also need the rebar right there.
Yeah.
You slide it to the center of the wall, you're talking a 50% reduction in strength. not 50 exactly, but I'm just saying roughly.
Right.
If, we could look at, if you could even write up a statement to that effect, that the board could agree to and we could agree. We'll figure out how to put it in.
Okay.
I agree that, that's a tight requirement. You want it there for the structural strength of that wall. And usually we do look at minimums on bars generally to be away from forms and things like that. So if we have a revision to that statement, we could look at that.
Okay. And then also, I mean, I get the first chart is for a granular backfill and the second chart's for clay backfill. How is that regulated? How do you know the contractor's gonna be backfilling with, let's say they used a granular chart? Are you guys actually going out there when they're backfilling then a week later or whenever that is after they pour the walls to make sure they're truly using granular?
Normally it would be something though, I think we would look at when we do the framing inspection. Cause again, but we have no knowledge of. So if they put the granular in and then put, say, 6 inches of clay before the final grade, you know, with your organic, yes, we wouldn't know, you know, that it was done. Don't see a whole lot of it,
Of granular?
yeah.
And that's why I'm wondering if it's even, if you don't see a whole lot of it, is it worth even giving them that option of using this other chart? Because you can't, there's no quality control there. I mean, I don't blame you guys. There's no way for you guys to check
Right.
that because you check it when they pour the walls and then you come out later where they're doing frame inspections, everything could be backfilled and you have no idea what they actually use for backfill. It's a big difference using the two different types of backfills on these walls. I mean, I've seen
Yep.
plenty of cases of basement walls starting to rotate inward on homes because they're not properly built. So,
It's, yeah, it's not a required inspection on our floodproofing
No, we
checklist, correct?
We do the flood-proof spray and the drain tile at that time to make sure they have enough rock and proper fabric down on the drain tile. But
Yeah.
after that, we generally don't go back.
So it's something we could look at requiring when they submit plans. I mean, these are standards they're supposed to follow, and there's a lot of things in the code that we do not inspect, and this is one of them.
okay.
We could request which detail they're using at the time. It'd be tough to add another inspection.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Ian, if you're going out there to look at the rebar, which table are you using? Are you asking the question when they're pouring the concrete, what their plan is for backfill? You know, how do you know which table to even check against when you're looking at the concrete?
Table B is 99.9%. I have not seen anybody in the past 5 years use table A.
Right.
Okay, okay, well, that makes sense
Yeah.
then.
And you always know what table they're using anyways from the spacing of the anchor bolts.
Part of that problem in our area is that in order to have a safe environment to put the forms in and do that, you're having a hole beside that foundation that's stepped back 6-8 feet. And to try to mix in granular with clay fill, it's just not gonna happen. So it's almost never that you're gonna see a granular filled foundation here. If someone's doing a wood foundation, they may be doing that for drainage, but on a concrete foundation, it's not gonna happen. And then it's kind of the other issue this has is your number 5 requirement that it not be backfilled until the framing is done and the floor is done. That doesn't happen either. Because it's about impossible. That's also a safety problem for the people out there trying to put a floor system on it or get a concrete floor in it if they've got a 6-8 foot wide gap between the top of the soil and the top of that foundation wall. So I think that realization kind of has to be there that that doesn't happen. It's about impossible to have it happen. I know since we've started, requiring buttresses in flood areas, I'm actually using them on some foundations where they're not required just because I want to be able to hold that wall in place better for that backfill operation. But that item 5, I haven't seen anybody put a floor system on with the home not being backfilled. They may do some bracing, but I don't know what adequate bracing means per se. Hopefully if they've got some long walls, they're doing something to try to keep it in place, but everything's getting backfilled before the floor's on.
Well, another question I had too was, we show this diagram with the granular fill and the clay above it, but as you were saying, Clay, you have a pretty big hole you dig. So how wide is your granular fill? If they come in there and put a 6-inch little column right next to the wall with granular fill, then is that okay? I mean, it's not, but this diagram doesn't show it. So I almost think if we're gonna change this to get to differentiate what that clear means, I almost feel like we should just get rid of the chart for the granular backfill altogether. If no one's using it anyways, it's hard to control that. It might be worth just getting rid of it. So,
Maybe staff can look at those two details, compare them, and discuss on their own the use of both of them, and see if it's worth it, and bring a recommendation at the next meeting.
sounds good. Thank you.
Section 404.133.6, form materials. They added wording, that forms shall be accurately positioned, secured in place before concrete is poured. Well, kind of common sense, but it's in there now. And then there's a change to 404.13371 steel reinforcement. There's a wording change again for a lot of it's always seismic D, which is earthquake. 406.2 is waterproofing. There used to be the exception you could use 40 mil polymer modified asphalt. Nobody uses it anymore. It's kind of an obsolete deal, so I think they just took it out of the code because nobody uses it. Section 408. This has to do with underfloor spaces. There was a lot of changes to that. Moisture control, 408.1, the underfloor space between the bottom of the floor joist and the earth under any building except space occupied by a basement shall comply with 408.2 or 408.3, which are the next sections. Opening for underfloor ventilation, ventilation openings through foundations or exterior walls surrounding the underfloor space shall be provided in accordance with this section. Minimal net area of the ventilation is not less than 1 square foot for each 150 square feet of underfloor area. One ventilation opening shall be within 3 feet of each external corner of the underfloor space. Ventilation openings shall be covered for their height and width with any of the following materials, provided that at least the covering not exceed 1/4 inch and operational louvers are permitted. There's exceptions. Like usual, the total area of the ventilation opening shall be permitted to be reused to 1/1500ths of the underfloor area where the ground surface is covered with a class 1 vapor retarder. Where the ground is covered with an approved class 1 vapor retardant, ventilation openings are not required to be within 3 feet of each external corner. Floor space provided that the openings are placed to provide cross ventilation. And then unvented crawl space, there was some wording there. They just clarified what they mean by unvented crawl space. And the last section, 408.8, underfloor vapor retarder in climate zones 1A, 2A, and 3A below the warm Hume line, a continuous vapor, class 1 or 2 vapor barrier shall be provided on the exposed face of the air permeable insulation installed between the floor joists exposed to the grade in the underfloor. The vapor retarder shall having a maximum vapor permanence of 1.5 when tested according to ASTM E96. And again, there's an exception, vapor retarder not required in unvented crawl spaces constructed in accordance with 408.3. And now that you're tired of listening to my voice, I'll let you listen to somebody else's. That's what I had for chapters 1 through 4.
Hello, I will be doing 5 through 6. I did not type everything out and not going to be nearly as wordy as Steve just was. I figure you have your amendments with you so you can read them, and you got any questions on it, you can always ask. Mine is starting off on page 512, 501.1. That is a added alternate application for floor framing, steel floor framing. If you exceeding the limits of R505.1.1, they are just referring you to the AISI S230. Um, 501.2, page 512, they deleted in that particular one in accordance with figure 505.1.2 and tolerances as followed 1 and 2. And they changed it to constructed in accordance with AISI 230 and subject to limits therein. R505.2.1, page 512, changed the complying requirements from ASTM A103 to ASI S240, section A3. R505.2.2, page 512, changed the complying requirements from ASTM A1003 to ASI S240, section 4. R505.2.3, page 513, deleted the table R505.2.3 and specified requirements and changed it to comply with the AISI S230, section A4.3 and A4. 505.2.4, page 513, changed to comply with AISI S230, section A5.5. Basically, this whole section took the ASTM out and they're changing the compliance with ASI instead of the ASTM. R505.2.6, also on page 513, changed compliance requirements to the AISI S230, section A4, A5, A6, and A7, or .7. and they deleted the code references to R 505.2.6.1, R 505.2.6.2, and R 505.2.6.3. So we're no longer looking at the code book for the reference, we're looking at the AISI for the reference. Moving on to the concrete ground floors, R6 or R506.2.3, page 625. Their main change there was they changed the vapor retard requirement thickness from 6 mil to 10 mil, and also conforming to the ASTM E17545 Class A requirements. So anybody out there building now is gonna have to make sure, even though it's not flood, we're gonna be changing to a 10 mil poly instead of the 6. Our 506.2.3, page 525. Oh, sorry, just did that one. Moving on to our exterior decks. Our 507.1 on page 525 added the design for live load requirements by section R301.5 or snow ground load, whichever is greater. We've never had the snow load in there before. We were just required with the 40 pound live load. And that brings us up to our 2018 amendment for R 507.3. That is our deck footings, and that has been deleted in its entirety. In table R 507.4 on page 528 and 529 added all the tables for deck post heights and load requirements for snow load. R 507.5, page 529, deck beams. They added shall be in accordance with table 507.5 parentheses 1 through R 507.5 parentheses 4. And they changed the wording for the beam cantilever to be the same as our amendment, that is R 507.5, which we can now strike because the code book now has that as a listing, so we don't need that in our amendments any longer. They changed the wording. The only thing we struck out of that was allowable spans to actual span, and the code did that for us. R 507.6, page 529, deleted the minimum cantilever shall be limited to a quarter of the joist span to specified in R 507.7 or whichever is less. R 507.7 on page 530, they just added plastic composites for the decking. Table R 507.1, parentheses 1, page 531. They just changed the beam spans and separated the wood types, and then they added tables 507.5, parentheses 2, 507.5, parentheses 3, and R 505 or 507.5, parentheses 4, and they just changed those to add ground load snowed. Table R 507.5, parentheses 5 on page 535. That table was added to be used with note J in the tables 507.5, parentheses 1 through 4. So basically it's just a separate little, it's a conversion table for doing calculations to be used with those 4 tables. Table R 507.6, page 538. They just changed that table to also include the ground snow load. Table R 507.7 on page 539 deleted plastic composites and added the notes B and C. Table R 507.9.1.3 parentheses 1 on page 540 changed to include snow loads and added note A and changed the verbiage on the others, but it all still has the same intent as far as the verbiage change. R 507.10 through R 507.10.4 on page 543. That was all added for guard specifications for decks. Wood wall framing, table R 602.3 parentheses 1, page 5 or 6-3. Item 1 was added, and then the wording to include blocking and nailing patterns. Item 5 was deleted. They deleted wording, ridge strap to rafters. Table R 602.3 parentheses 1 on page 64. Item 12 was added new. And item 16 was deleted, and that was the number of nails left at 16 inches was the number of nails, and they left it as 16 inches face nailed. Table R 602.3 parentheses 1 on page 65. Item 26 and 27 moved from item 25 and 26. So in the 18, they just, because they're adding more to this particular chart, they just changed the numbering of that system. And then item 30 on the same chart, they added wording to include rafter and trusses. And then on the same chart, items 31 and 34 just changed the spacing of the fasteners. Table R 602.31, page 6-6, items 34 through 40 added wording for the type of the fasteners. So basically, instead of just telling that it was a 3D or a 6D, they actually spelled out exactly what the fasteners are. Table R 602.3.1 parentheses 1, page 6-6, note A, added connections using nails and staples and other materials such as stainless steel. It was just added wordage. And then on the same table, note B was deleted and it was replaced to meet the specifications of ASTM F1667. Note G was added to be in accordance with ASTM C1280. And then table R602.3 parentheses 2, page 6-7. 1/4 inch fiberboard, changed the 3D nail to 1.25 by 0.009, and it was just basically the description of the fasteners. The hardboard in that table also just changed the description of the fasteners, and the particle board in that table also just changed the description of the fasteners. Table R602.3, parentheses 2 on page 6.8. Note G changed wording. It's the same intent. And then they changed the wind speed from 130 miles an hour on that table to 110. R602.6 on page 612 changed a lot of the wording, but the intent is still the same. And then our amendment, R602.7.2, was a wording change, and it was suggested to just stay the same. R602.7.5, which was amended, was a wording change, and it suggested it just stays the same. And then table R602.7.5 was deleted in its entirety. That's because of the wording change from 602.7.5. And it is suggested it just stays, that table stays deleted. R602.10.1.2, page 615, changed the code text from the beginning of the code from offset along braced wall lines to locations of braced wall lines. Okay, they changed, it was just the text from offset along braced wall lines, and they changed it to locations of braced wall lines and permitted offsets. They added each braced wall line shall be located such that no more than 2/3 of the required brace panel length is located on the same side of a braced wall line. Table 602.10.1.3, page 6-21, deleted 100 miles per hour for the wind and left it as less than 140. R602.10.2.2, page 622, added the exceptions 1 and 2, which are seismic. R602.10.2.2.1 on page 622, which are seismic. They just added exceptions 1 and 2. Well, exception 1 and 2 became 1.1, 1.2, and then they added a new exception 1 and 2. Table R602.10.3, parentheses 1, added ultimate wind design speed less than 195, or less than 95 miles per hour. Table 602.10.3, parentheses 3 on page 628 through 630, which these are all basically based on seismic design, changed the wording and added footnotes F and H. Table 602.10.3, parentheses 4, page 631. This is wall bracing, which are also based on seismic. They changed the reference tables and they added footnote G. R602.10.6.5.1 through R602.10.6.5.3 on page 65, also based on seismic, was the stone masonry veneer. There were several changes. I don't think we really need to go there because we're not building in seismic areas. The rest of that code, which deals with what we have, has not changed. R602.10.6.5.4 on page 6-42. The length of bracing added adjustment factors, which are basically for seismic. Our adjustment factors have not changed. R 602.10.10.1, page 650, also seismic added cripple walls to the bracing method. And then moving on to the cold form steel wall framing, R 603.1.1.1 on page 6-54. That was added for alternate applications. And then R 603.1.2 through R 603.2.6 on page 654. Basically, all of that was reworded to change to the compliances of ASTM or AISI. R 608.8 on page 6-107 added provisions for the use of ACI 332 as one of the requirement options. R 609.3, page 6-179, was reworded. The intent is the same as was in 18. And then the other last one is R 609.4, added R 609.4.1, which is garage door labeling to be permanent labels, which are going to be required not just for the testing, but it's going to require the manufacturer and all of the testing requirements that are on that label to be permanent. And as far as 5 and 6, that should do it. Then we'll let Bill take over.
Chairman? Just gonna ask how long you want this meeting to go.
It's gonna be quick. I'm thinking maybe 10 minutes. I know, I'm good at that. Hello, everybody. I'm gonna be going through chapters 7 through 9. There's no amendments in any 3 of these chapters. The biggest change that I wanted to point out is right away in chapter 7, so it's going to be page 7-5. And that's dealing with vapor retarders. And what changed is the class 2 vapor retarder, which is known as paper face bad insulation, isn't going to be allowed anymore unless there's rigid foam on the exterior. That's not going to be too big of a deal, but sometimes when I'm running into homeowners, they prefer to do the bad insulation if they're going to be doing it themselves. If we go to page 7-7, the water resistive barriers, there was some minor changes. The description was expanded to include rigid foam finishes. On page 7-11, there was just minor changes with the description kind of being consolidated. If you go to the page 7-13, so there's going to be 2 tables, R703.6.31 and R703.6.32. They changed so they deleted the head diameter and shank thickness columns. They were both deleted just to kind of consolidate the tables down. On 7-13, the furring section, the furring requirements were added where provided. On page 7-14, dry and moist climates, the water resistive barrier requirements were divided into 2 groups, dry and moist. They were consolidated in the 2018 IRC. On page 7-19, anchorage, there was a change, so attachment to studs were not required when the table 703.85 for 2 was used, and the insulated sheeting is less than 2 inches. On page 7-20, there's table 703.841. The table was expanded to include air spaces of up to 6 5/8 inches. Page 7-23, table 703.11.2. The table was expanded to include 195 mile-an-hour wind design speed. Page 7-24, table 703.15.1. The table was expanded to include 15 PSF cladding weight. On page 7-25, table 703.15.2, the table was also expanded to include the 15 PSF siding weight. On page 7-26, table 703.16.1, again, the table expanded to include that column for the 15 PSF cladding weight. And it's going to be the same thing on the table 703.16.2. The last item in the 7th chapter there is soffits. The entire section is new. What it's addressing is vinyl, fiber cement, hardboard, wood structural soffit panels. It is pretty much pointing out the maximum soffit widths before you need to have more backers in place. That was it for chapter 7. Now on chapter 8, I'm going to go through it quick. It was just minor changes, mostly in verbiage. So on page 8-19, section 802.4.2, the entire section was new. It's going to be some changes as far as the rafters are going to be allowed to be offset up to 1.5 inches. Gusset plates were now allowed in place of collar ties. Page 8-20, ridge straps are permitted to replace collar ties, and then they have a minimum size of 1.25 inch by 20 gauge. 8-24, that's going to be R802.5.2. The section was cleaned up. There were some changes to the joist heel connection. There was a table that had the columns reduced to 12, 24, and 36 foot roof spans. Page 8-25, rafter ties. The spacing was now limited to 24 inches on center. On page 8-25, on roofs equal to or greater than a 312 pitch, a continuous tension tie and vertical bearing will satisfy the bearing requirement. Page 8-27, there was some exemptions that were added to allow attachment using table R602.31. If we skip down to page 8-32, there's a table 804.3. The wind speed columns changed a little bit, so now they're modified to 115, 120, 130, and then more than 139. On page 8-37, that's going to be for rake overhangs. There was a table that was added to help determine the allowable overhang. That's going to clean up chapter 8, so we're going to move on to chapter 9, the roof assemblies. This one's getting into solar panels, and I don't see a lot of them in this area, but I'm going to go through it anyway. On page 9-1, there's an abbreviation now for the photovoltaic panel, so it's a BIPV products. and that's what it's gonna be known as in the entire section. There was some UO listing number changes on 9-1. There was some wind speed columns that were added on page 9-3. There was a new table that's added on 9-7, and that had to do with wind resistance and what the shingles are going to be classified for as far as wind speed. On page 9-9, that got into some fastener requirements. This one's going to be for the wood shakes or the wood shingles. The table was changed up a little bit to consolidate the nail type, minimum length, and shank diameter all into one column. The rest was pretty much just minor changes in UL listings, classifications. Not too much change in that chapter. So that would conclude the chapter 9. Did you guys have any questions? All right, thank you.
Move on to staff reports.
Nothing today, thank you.
Okay, I would like to take this opportunity to understand, Bruce, that this is the last meeting that we'll have you with us at. And so when are you officially calling it quits?
My last day is September 3rd.
I'm jealous. No, it's been great working with you all these years, and I want to give the board an opportunity to express their gratitude for your service over the course of your career.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure too. The board has always been great to work with, flexible. Sometimes I gotta text Dave Overmiller to get here, but he always does if we need him. And it runs very smoothly, even through transitions and meeting schedule changes, everything like that. It's you're all great to work with, so thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Anybody else got anything else they'd like to say, or should we,
I'd make an motion to adjourn the meeting.
do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
We are adjourned.